Once your goal is sharply but realistically defined, all that remains is carrying out your plan. In other words, you'll never know how good you might have become unless you try. So let's get with it.
Let me start by saying that this thumbnail is not an accurate representation of my physique. I worked very hard for my lats, and this is the original picture. Chad GPT did me dirty. All right, my bodybuilding fans, fitness enthusiasts, gym rats, gym bros, gym girls, Samsolic binge watchers, whoever you are. We're here to talk about part 2 of chapter 2, which is individual potential. So what we're really approaching in this chapter is the indicators that show you whether you have what it takes to build a Mr. Olympia physique or not. And the thing is, it was a long chapter in terms of concepts, so I decided to divide it in two. We started with the somatotypes, skeletal formation, and muscle length. So if you missed that, just go back to my page and check the video. And today we're going to start with the fourth indicator, which is fat distribution. Turns out that's also genetic. I feel like anyone can relate to this, honestly, because you notice in yourself areas where you can't really get rid of that fat, you know? For me, love handles and lower back, crazy. Like my arms, they stay pretty lean year round, legs too. Don't have much fat on my back, but love handles, dude, that's crazy for me. And certain people have more fat in specific areas, and that's genetic. Mike's take here is, just as people are genetically programmed to increase the size of certain muscles, they also inherit a certain number of fat or adipose cells. The distribution of these cells is genetically determined as well. The average non-obese person possesses approximately 25 to 30 billion fat cells. The moderately obese about 50 billion, and the very obese as many as 240 billion. How he came up with those numbers, I have no idea. I don't even know how you would measure that. But he said it, so we can trust it, but the number is irrelevant. We can take this a step further. So yeah, people accumulate fat in different areas of their body. But is there any similarity or like any patterns in the type of people that accumulate fat in a certain area of their body versus another? Mike says there is. Again, as much as we can learn from everything that's in this book, literally everything, there's concepts that I'm not really sure about, and I always keep an open mind, right? Like I read this, I don't take it as 100% truth, but I also don't say it's a lie. I just go ahead and research like anyone should, right? So, Mike says, racial and geographic background determines in large part where fat is disposed. People from colder parts of the world, like Germany and Norway, have much of their fat distributed in the abdomen and torso areas, which helps insulate the internal organs from the extreme cold and maintain a steady core temperature. People from warm areas, such as Africa, naturally tend to store less fat subcutaneously in order to allow the body heat to escape, thus maintaining a cool body. While it does make sense when you read it, I went ahead and did some research. Here's what I found. So basically, yes, your ancestors are responsible for whatever body fat you have accumulated anywhere in your body. But how does that relate to bodybuilding? Well, we know that being shredded or the conditioning that you bring on stage has become much, much more important, especially with the rise of Dorian Yates, who was basically a conditioning freak. There was more people like that before, but Dorian was able to combine mass with extreme conditioning, right? And so basically, if you have the tendency to store lower amounts of body fat naturally, there's a good indicator for you to become the next Mr. Olympia. Now that we got fat distribution checked out, we got fiber density and neurological efficiency. What is that? What are we talking about? Fiber density determines the mass potential of a muscle. The more fibers per given volume of muscle, the thicker that muscle's potential to develop. So when you look at bodybuilders on stage, ready to compete, you can see their muscle fibers. And when you look at that, the more fibers in a given area of muscle, there is more probability that the muscle can be thicker or bigger. The thing is, we all have muscle fibers. The muscle structurally is the same, but the amount of fibers that X person has versus Y person has is going to be different. And the more you have, the more potential for muscle building. And now comes the part of neurological efficiency, which is so underrated, but I've seen people talk more about it frequently. Neurological efficiency refers to the relationship between the nervous system and the muscles. How nerves innervate the muscles and how they are activated by the brain determine the degree of muscle power and the number of fibers required to produce a certain movement against a certain resistance. So with fiber density, there's the amount of fibers you have in a given volume, right? Then okay, you can have a lot of muscle fibers in a given area for a given volume. But what if you're not able to contract the muscle fibers? What if you can only contract 5% of those? If I were to have 10 muscle fibers in my bicep, and then you have 20, so double. But you're only able to contract 5% of your muscle fibers. Oh my God. And I'm able to contract 10. The potential there is the same. And then again, this is easier to understand if you're actually a bodybuilder or if you're someone that's super interested in the sport to the point where you pose, you practice posing, you go deep into the relationship of my body and mind, you know? So whenever I pose, sometimes when I'm doing anything related to quads, I contract, but then it keeps like pulsating because I'm not able to contract it fully yet because I'm not as aware of that part of the muscle. And that's something that I've been working on. And I just realized that it connects to this. This is going to be true for whenever you're executing an exercise too. So the more you can contract your muscle, the better. So the more fibers that you can contract, the better the potential for you to build more muscle, right? And that's the importance of being focused on the exercise and not just throwing weight around. But what percentage of muscle fibers can people activate? This is what Mike's talking about now. The average person may contract 30% of the fibers within a specific muscle. A few people may have the capacity to activate as many as 40%, while a blessed few may manage 50%. The ability to contract a high percentage of fibers increases contractile capacity, thus enabling more intense exertion. In terms of endurance, this is a disadvantage, but a great advantage for stimulating growth or single attempt efforts. So again, we are talking about building muscle. We're not talking about resistance, for example. This is not saying, oh, you have more muscle fibers for a given muscle, great, you're better. You're better for building muscle, for bodybuilding. But if you wanted to be someone that does like marathons or like anything related to resistance, probably not. So again, this is all useful information for anyone, but this is everything that's talked about here is in terms of building muscle in bodybuilding. So keep that in your mind whenever we go through all this content. What about innate adaptability? What is Mike talking about here? The innate adaptability is the concept to how much stress a person can handle when it comes to exercise. And this is expressed in a broad continuum, right? So you have a group of, so if you gather a sample of, 100 people, they're going to be distributed along this line where the lower tolerance group is on one side and then the higher tolerance group is on the other side. And there's everything in between. So if you fall on the side of the spectrum where you have high tolerance for stress coming from exercise, you're probably able to train more frequently, for example. You recover faster. Versus if you're not, you probably have to take a few days off before you can go again. And just by understanding where you fall in that spectrum, you're able to adapt and plan your training accordingly. So there's strategy behind it. Since genetically mediated traits such as height, sunlight stress tolerance, and intelligence are expressed across a broad continuum, it occurred to me several years back that the ability of the human body to tolerate the stress of exercise, being a genetically mediated feature, would likewise be expressed across a broad continuum. We're going to dive deep into this concept later in the book, but for now, we must understand that there are limits to each person's capacity to tolerate stress. And with that, you're going to be able to plan your strategy ahead and understand how your body works. And last but not least, we got the psychological factors. It's hard for me to say this, but it's probably my favorite subject. Why? The physical aspect is so clear in bodybuilding, right? Like you work out, you eat, and then you do cardio, all those things. And those are really hard, especially if you can do that consistently throughout years and years. It's extremely hard. But the mental hardship and whatever the strategy, the resilience, the discipline, everything related to the psychological part of it is not talked about enough. I don't think so. And just by trying to live life as a bodybuilder, because I'm saying that because I haven't competed yet. I will, but I haven't competed yet. It's shown me so much about the limits that I thought I had physically, but also psychologically. And this is what Mike says. Those of you who train in commercial or public gyms with other bodybuilders have undoubtedly encountered those who obviously possess extraordinary physical potential, yet never seem to go as far in the sport as they might. When you get to the top in most things, but here I'm talking about sports, in our case, bodybuilding. Everyone that's at the top, so I mean like top 15 in the world, that being open, that being classic, that being men's physique, that being wellness, that being bikini, whatever. The physical aspect is pretty much covered because, I mean, you're there, right? But how far you can go and how much you can achieve is going to come down to your psychological side. What about when you get to prep and then all of a sudden you freak out and you go ahead and eat a bunch of junk food because you can't control yourself? Or you can't be as consistent as the guy that placed first and you placed fifth. You think you're consistent and you probably are, but when it comes to the top, those details usually come from a side where the physical aspect is pretty much done already. It's all about willpower. It's all about having a vision, a purpose to keep you going. And this is just another filter, right? So your genetic potential in terms of the physical aspects. It's just filtering what people can reach the top in the sport. And then the psychological is almost like the final boss. Here's what Mike says about it. Given a representative cross-section of 100,000 normal males, there might be 20 from that number who have an extraordinary physical potential for developing a muscular physique. Of those 20 thoroughbreds, perhaps 5 with the drive and determination required to take up the hard training for the length of time needed will be able to actualize a good percentage of their potential. The number will be small because it requires an obsessed nature to pursue any endeavor to its limit. And this can go so much deeper because basically you have to be obsessed because there's so much that you're losing just by focusing on that goal that most people give up, right? That's opportunity cost, economics 101. And yes, I am an economics major. So you're giving up time with your family, with friends. You're giving up the pleasure from eating food that you love. You're giving up so much and for so long that for some people it's just not worth it, and it's completely fine, right? And that acts as a filter in itself. And those who reach the top, they might be able to do so with a balanced approach, but balanced in their own terms. Because if you're elite, and when I mean elite, it's like top 1%, there's no such thing as balance. I don't believe, at least. Then ambition, willpower, dreams, discipline. Those are all things that they are within you, but they of course can be developed, right? My specific case, I was always a disciplined person. Even as a child, I remember my mom would beg me to go play, but I was like, no, I gotta finish my homework first so I can go play. What a fucking stupid kid. But it was just part of me. And how does that translate into my adult life? Well, I'm bodybuilding, so that's a lot of discipline in itself. But I have much more ambition than people around me. And I've noticed that. In a lot of cases, that makes me feel distant from people. And of course, it's not a pleasant feeling, but I believe in myself. And I believe that the things that I want are going to be valuable to me whenever I get them. And that's the issue with the journey, right? And it's really not an issue. But until you get there, until you make it, it's all subjective. And then what if it doesn't work out, right? There's always room for doubt. But again, my mind doesn't go there. My mind goes to, what if it works out? It's not about what if it doesn't work out, but what if it works out? You know, that's my vision now. It might change later. Life happens, you know? So I might have to drop everything to go make some extra money because I get sick all of a sudden. Or there's emergencies in life. And like I said, life happens. But drive and determination usually overcome that. Even if you have to take small pauses, for you to accomplish your ultimate goal, it'll take a lot of you. Not of you, but from you too. And again, it's personal, right? Some people want balance, some people want excellence, some people just want to chill, some people want to be extreme in something, right? Like there's nothing right or wrong about this. It's just different types of people. And with that, we finished chapter 2. This is a very interesting chapter. I like it a lot. And for next chapter, it's going to be the last section of the first part of the book. Chapter is called On the Need for Principles. And
it's so interesting how the concepts from this book can actually be applied today. This book was published in 2001, but these are things that Mike learned throughout his life, so 70s, 80s, 90s. And Need for Principles is going to talk about having guidelines, having a direction, having principles, right? Amongst all the noise that you're going to encounter. So, man, I love this book, and I love that I can share whatever I learned from it and the content in itself, so people can be better. People can be more aligned with what they want, they can learn, and I feel like this is what it's all about. I am really excited to keep posting. I feel like people are liking this, and yeah, I guess I'm going to see you on the Need for Principles, Chapter 3. I don't know when, but soon enough. Thank you guys so much for watching, and see you then. Peace.